So here we go, everyone. This is our season 4, first show of season 4. So welcome everyone to the Daily Restaurant Show, your daily dish. I like how the AI system created this. Your daily dish of industry insights and trends that keeps you ahead of the culinary curve, and also what's happening in the restaurant and food service and hospitality world as well. I'm your host, Jay Ashton, and today we are serving up a piping hot episode with some incredible superb experts in the industry. Yeah, that's you too. Then the green room. You know what? Our guests bring huge amount of knowledge and professional research experience in this industry. Some of you're the best when it comes to our industry, and this is super exciting for me to have both of them on today. So really around this is today we're going to talk a lot about what's happening in the US and comparing to Canada and really finding, are we going to see that recovery that we see in the US market really happen in Canada as well? So we've got a great show lined up, everyone. And you know what? Sit back, listen to this on your iTunes and Spotify. I guess there's a little plug for you guys on your channels, wherever you're listening to this podcast. And we'll be right back after this. Here we go. There you go. Like that intro?
Absolutely.
Is that pretty good, eh? So welcome back, everyone. You know what? This is really exciting here. So I'm going to introduce Margot Swindall. Did I say that right, Margot?
Of course.
There we go. Good. Thank God. I was going to say, we've had a few shows in the past. I better say that right. And then Rich Shank. So you're both from Technomics. And I am excited today to talk about this topic because we're seeing this in the US market right now. We're seeing some stuff. We get a lot of information from the US of what's happening down there. And I think it's important to talk about it. Are we going to see this in Canada? Do you want to share kind of some of the insights that we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, certainly. So I wanted to just kind of focus on the pace of recovery in the US and talk about it in the context of the Canadian recovery post-pandemic, and then discuss a few of the major shifts in the market that we've seen in the US that we would expect to come to full fruition in Canada as well. So excited to chat today.
Perfect. And Margot, you always bring insights. You look like you're like in this huge studio.
I am.
Well, welcome. First of all, thank you for coming back, Margot. And
we're really excited to be working with you for season 4, Jay. So this is going to be a great kickoff.
And we're going to have more shows with you.
We are. Yeah. Great kickoff with Rich, and I'm sure you're going to give him a little bit of an intro, but he's one of our many experts at Technomic, and I'm just thrilled he could make it today.
Yeah, you know, so Rich, you're the Senior Principal and Vice President of Innovation at Technomic. What's that mean? That's a big title.
I'm still trying to figure that out myself, but it means I have sort of 2 hats, right? So the senior principal hat is I do research and consulting with our restaurant operator customers. So wow. A lot of what we do in that space is going to be around menu innovation, price sensitivity, and elasticity modeling, as well as customer experience. We do some menu design work, stuff like that. So it's a lot of just helping the operator get to market with new products and making sure their services fit the customer. And then my other hat is innovation for Technomic, new product innovation, mostly data science driven products. So we're in the process of, looking at more transactional data sets to bring to market and stuff like that. So that's another part of my role. I have a data science team that reports into me that works on that sort of stuff.
Very cool. Very cool. So this ad read we're going to launch, because we got to go to this thing. Margot, you can't laugh at the ad read that I do for you, but this is about Ignite. Is that right? Is that a program that you offer?
Yeah.
Yes. So you got to tune in. So I'm going to do this, and then we'll get back. We'll get into some slides, get some discussion going here around this. I'm just excited, Rich, to have you as well. Margot, I'm always excited when you're on the show, by the way, is the conversations, because we go into this and it gets deep. But Rich, menu, I have so many questions around menu on today's subject. So anyways, okay. So here we go, Margot, my first ad read for you. So
go for it.
Here we go. All right, here we go, folks. This is incredible. So power up your business with Technomic Ignite. Size up the industry with forecast segments. So look at this. You can look at restaurant, bars, travel, and leisure. You can size it up. Explore sales and unit information for the leading 250 Canadian operators. Look what A&W is doing. You can find out what they're doing and what other locations and operators are doing right now. Then this is best. You can compare your menus and fill in the gaps where you need. Understand what drives your guest behaviors. Do you know what that is? I don't think you do. But with Technomic Ignite, you can. Look at this. Look at all that information and data that you want. So power up your business with Technomic Ignite. For more information, check them out. Incredible program. There you go.
Thanks, Jay.
So I was just going to say, so can you tell us just a little bit about, but before we get into today's discussion, is that system available for people?
It is. If I could just jump in here, Rich. So Technomic has two sides to our business. So we have the syndicated side. Syndicated market research means this is in market all the time. It's happening, and we do Canadian industry sizing companies. We track the top 250 chains. We have menu data we're constantly pulling on a quarterly basis for core restaurant menus, chains and independents by region. And then we do monthly LTO analysis on for the top 200 chains. And then we have really robust consumer tracking, Canadian consumer tracking when they visit food service. So very different from traditional retail tracking, but what are their usage attitudes, behaviors, preferences, and their experience at a number of brands. So that's called that Ignite portfolio that you just saw some of pop up with the ad. And then there is the custom advisory side, and Rich leads that up. So he's a senior principal. He works as a specialist in our operator practice. He talked a little bit about that. I'll let him talk about it. But we do all sorts of custom work, Canada, the US, and around the globe for suppliers, operators, distributors, near-term companies, think packaging or uniforms or any of that. We really have a 360-degree approach to the industry. So maybe pass it over to Rich to talk a little bit more about the operator piece, and you'll see pretty quickly what an expert he is.
I was going to say, Rich, did you create this thing too? Like, this thing's insane.
Oh no, it's been a collective effort. I've been at Technomic 12 years, but my first job was to manage and launch the consumer tracker that you saw at the very end of the video. But we've been doing financial tracking and menu tracking for decades. So I'm older than the database, but it predates my time at Technomic. So
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, let's jump into the questions into this topic. Do you want the slides up?
Yeah, let's jump to the first slide. This is obviously just an overview of who we are, right? We've been around the block, so to speak. We understand food service in North America better than anyone, I believe.
I would agree.
And just having a view on what's going on in the market and then applying that into our consulting practice is really, what folks like me do. But then we have we have 150 people working on data products and behind the scenes to make sure that they come alive for our subscribers as well. So it's a lot of fun.
Very cool. So for today's show, I'm going to try to explain what we have to, because we're going to hear a lot of this audio, and people listen to our shows on iTunes and Spotify, they won't be able to see this. Actually, Spotify, you'll be able to watch this on YouTube as well. So people want to see these slides because they're good stuff. I'll try to share with you what they look like, and what we'll have to explain that. But this is crazy information that we're seeing right here. So Rich, let's get into this.
Yep. So this is what we call our Technomic index, right? And in the US, we have some dynamic data sources that we use to produce this index. It's really early in the early stages of the recovery, or of the pandemic, if you will. We weren't recovering at this time. We wanted to come up with a recovery metric to understand where we are in the development of whatever the new normal was going to be, and so what we wanted to do was index month over month what sales were like, today versus 2019, and so anything over 100 on this index is telling us that sales are higher than they were the same month in 2019. So in July of 2023, our index is 108.8, which means that we're 8.8% higher than July of 2019, which is sort of its pre-pandemic norm, if you will, right? And this thing has been over 100 for, since essentially June of 2021, meaning that we, in the US, we had recovered our sales by June 2021, right? And
wow.
It's sort of hovered between 101 and 103 until the mid-year of 2022, and has since grown to 108.8. And 2 months ago, we actually hit our highest point at 111, since the pandemic started. So that would have been in May. And so this is total sales. It's all dollars, going through the system. It's not traffic, if you will, and we'll talk a little bit about traffic. But one of the things that when we look at an index like this and we compare it with what's going on in Canada, for example, in the US, we saw a very sort of jagged recovery period. We went down in April and then immediately in June started to increase sales again, right, in 2020. And then by the end of 2021, we were actually seeing significant growth compared to 2020. And then that growth leveled off in 2022. It went from, high 20s to mid-teens in 2021 to 2022. In the US or in Canada, we actually see a different recovery pattern, which is less jagged and more even, if you will.
So
over a 2-year period, you're seeing a recovery versus in the US, we saw that recovery happen in 1 year.
Okay. So those indications we're sitting right now. So if I'm an operator right now in the industry, what are some of those things that I'm going to be looking for when I see these numbers, 8.8 over top of the 100? Is this good stuff I'm seeing, or should I be worried? What should I be thinking about?
To me, it's a confidence builder, right? So one of the things that we saw
That's
in the
good.
US,
That's good.
Yeah, in the US, when sales turned positive, outlook turned negative. Like in the US, we had a bit of a mental recession, if you will, where consumer confidence was at its lowest point at the same time that the economy was humming fairly strongly. So things were a little out of whack with what was going on in the financial numbers versus what consumers were feeling versus what operators were feeling. There's a lot of pessimism between June 2021 and early part of this year in the US, right? And that's actually since turned positive. Our consumer confidence numbers have gone up. Operator confidence is up, things of that nature. And I know that's in distinct opposition to what's going on in Canada, where consumer confidence is low. And so what I see is a market that looks a lot like the US did a year ago.
I was going to say that. Is that where we were? Like now is where the US was a year ago. And I see that. I can feel it. I can feel that. Yeah. Like, Margot, do you feel that as well?
For sure. And it's important to know, Rich talked about it. The US went down fast. Canada went down, right? But we went through rolling closures, some by province, then, in the end by national. So 2020 and 2021 were series and sequence of consumer confidence was low. However, restaurant sales were really dramatically hit. But that said, once we opened up, and we even saw the recovery in the second year there, we saw the operators did that quote, the pivot to takeout and off premise, and everybody got their stride. So when we started to come out, Rich referred to sort of almost a straight line up. We've had tremendous recovery in terms of performance. And I think, I'll let Rich talk about the lag, the US. And let's face it, everybody said it, a lot of the clients we're talking to, they're saying, well, we're going to experience the exact same thing as the US and we want to look to the US now because they're ahead of us in terms of their recovery out of the pandemic. And to some extent, that's very true. And there's a few things that don't quite align, but I'll pass it over to Rich to talk a little bit more about where the US is, and I'll jump in on anything I can.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. The one thing, there's a couple things that I think we've experienced that in the US that in theory should be lagging and coming towards Canada in the coming months or year. One of those is inflation. So we've seen our inflation numbers coming down on total food overall. The producer price index actually this month was the first time it went negative year over year in about 2 years, which means that there's a little bit of cost pressure relief happening for the operator right now. But we haven't seen that fully translate into significantly slower price increases in the restaurant space, which we can talk about in a minute, because I think there was a lot of pricing actions being taken out of fear last year that we may be paying for in the near future in the U.S. market. So
now, Rich, on that, I got to ask this question because I was just having this discussion today about this. Is that with the inflation, and maybe this is maybe down the road question for today's show, but are the menus lagging where the inflation is, because they've increased? Let's say I think all menus have done a bump or have increased, but because inflation moves so fast, maybe this is in the Canadian market, but the inflation moves so fast on us that the menu prices just could not go with how fast the inflation was.
There's a lot of logistics that go into price increase at a restaurant that wouldn't be able to keep up with the contracts that are coming in the back of house, right? So if you're a major chain, it's a huge undertaking to change menu boards or reprint, hundreds of menus.
Well, just the research, the research and education and everything, it's got to go a lot. But I just think look at because I remember doing like a lot of research back in the day just on the price of bread versus like a steak sandwich on a menu. And you could see steak sandwiches. Yeah, they were obviously cheaper 50, 60 years ago on a menu, but bread was significantly cheaper than it is today. Like they didn't, like the prices didn't, they kind of went to the right direction, but the steak isn't $40 back, 20 years ago. Today it might be, but it takes time to move up and to, I'm assuming, get a lot of the confidence in the consumer to accept some of those menu prices. And I think just the way the speed that inflation went, there's no way you're going to catch that.
No, go ahead, Margot. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, there's also something a little interesting, and maybe it's just the conservative nature of and the fear factor that some of the Canadian operators were feeling. But for the most part, in Canada, retail grocery food inflation and price increases have exceeded what's been going on menus, whereas in the US, that wasn't necessarily the case. Yeah. And so for the most recent month I've got here, so Canadian restaurant food inflation for July was at 6.1%. Retail grocery inflation in Canada was still at 8.5%. And it's been flipped to some extent the other way around. And I think there's a lot of fear with operators too. They have taken prices, and there is a tipping point where guests are not going to be either cutting out a meal occasion altogether or cutting out what we call a meal part. So not having the dessert or not having an appetizer.
Now, are we seeing that still today? Like those cutouts?
Our price increases have continued to go up in Canada, but they're not going up as fast as retail groceries. So in theory, food service is still, as a viable option to get food in Canada because people can see it's very visible. The price increases are very noticeable when you go to the grocery store, item by item by item, and then of course your checkout bill at the end. Again, pass it back over to Rich to talk about what's going on in the US and the trade-off between what we call that share of stomach between retail and food service.
And so what we have seen, so in August of 2022, retail food was at 13.5% inflation in the US, and that was its peak, and it has significantly dropped to about 3.1.
Oh, wow.
Now.
That's a big drop. Huge drop.
But what we've saw in price inflation in the restaurant space was it wasn't as rapid as retail in 2021, but there was a sort of steady climb in prices that peaked. Let's see, it was in March of this year at 8.8%, and that was at that point at its peak was the first month where retail price inflation actually started going lower than restaurants. So at some point in the supply chain, what we've seen is the advantage that restaurants held in 2022 has actually been eroded, and price increases are now roughly double what's going on in retail on the restaurant space, which is why I was saying I think we've been making some decisions that might come back to bite us, because our share of stomach and behaviors in the US may be on the verge of shifting. There's a lot of consumers who are about to start having to pay their student loans back here in the next month or so. That's going to be a big chunk out of their disposable income. And as they face those decisions they're making with a double the inflation rate in the restaurant space versus retail, we should expect some changes to happen here in the US. And so I would be looking at the relationship between away from home and at home while we're making it, because if you see that same sort of line crossing where it favors the grocery store, that's where the pricing risks are going to really become acute. And the US is starting to face that just in the last couple of months.
So from an operator, what do you do? Like, what's some tips? Like, where do you sit?
You
That's huge.
You really need to study and understand how your customers are going to respond to price increases. You not only do you need to know what they can afford and how they've responded to your past price increases, but you really need to ask them in very clever ways about what they're willing to spend on a product by product basis. When we do price elasticity and sensitivity research, we like to create a risk scorecard for every item, so that the restaurant operator can make clear-eyed decisions about the risks they're taking when they're needing to take price, because there's financial concerns that are going to be forcing them to take price in areas of the menu where they maybe really shouldn't be, if you will, because customers are potentially tuning out because of the price points. So really understanding what those are and what those risks are help make artful decisions about pricing versus costs went up 4%, so I'm going to take 5% just in case it goes up again, versus doing a cost plus analysis. It's really sort of a consumer perception driven model, understanding how your past price increases have changed demand and blending that together in a risk assessment, which is it's a lot of work, but investing a little bit of time to save you some money in the end has a pretty significant payoff. So
it's funny you say that. I used to call it banking inflation when we used to do menus and stuff like this, or dealing with inflation. It was not like it is today, but we used to always say, do that 1% to 2%, because even if you bank that inflation on your menu, those rainy days or the freezer goes down, there's some little bit of a safety net there to help support some of those, unexpected situations that always happens.
Yeah, I mean,
in
and
your
usually if you
restaurant.
see 4%, you're going to see a 5% price increase, or at least your CFO is going to ask for that, and and you're going to have to figure out how to give it to them regardless. But the that sort of thing is definitely a very important aspect of today's environment, because as I mentioned, I think in our lead up here, we had a lot of customers pricing their menus out of fear. And so they were potentially overbanking the inflation, if you will. And so their menus are, we have a couple of customers in particular where, their franchise environment is, a little different than their corporate owned stores where they can control pricing. But, so their system may look a little bit like the Wild West when it comes to pricing. Whereas, before there was an orderly pattern, and trying to wrangle in and control to sort of control the brand story becomes very hard in this environment because of that.
Are we ever going to get away from that? Like in the future, is this just the new norm that restaurants are going to have to account for, that just they have to really be more strategic in pricing out their menus than ever before?
Well, what we have seen is a really strong demand for greater transparency in the supply chain when it comes to not only pricing, but as well as availability of products because of supply shortages and things of that nature. But there are new widgets out there that allow a restaurant operator to put a plug-in on their portal, and they can, when they're on their web on their web browser, and they can see competitive pricing across distributors. There's a lot of things out there that are popping up to try to help the operator make decisions around pricing and on their own environment, whereas those things didn't exist before the pandemic. So there's a lot of new sort of technologies growing to help them make those decisions, if you will.
It did exist, Rich. It was called driving around and stealing menus from your competitors.
Yeah, well, this was even at the distributor level back of house, right? Where if you log into one of your competitors' portals, someone could, and they have a login to yours, they could see the same, SKU based on that universal number and look at the price difference.
Wow, that is absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Rich, I wondered if it makes sense. I mean, big burning question, of course, the hitting 8.8%, driven in part by menu inflation, in part by recovery. To talk a little bit about traffic and what you see going on in the US, because it's a burning question here, which is what are people doing? Are they still dining out? And what's changed since the pandemic?
So is this slide, Rich? Did I do that right?
So I think this will be like, I'll lead into this slide based on what her question is. But so what you're looking at on this screen is the share of where orders originate in the US versus off premise, essentially, right? So the top bar there, the top line is going to be your dine in, right? And then the middle line, the middle blue line is going to be drive through, and then everything is all other off premise. And so before the pandemic, on average across every restaurant type, full service, limited service, 61% of orders originated within the store. Now, some of those could have been takeout, but they originated with a human inside, right? And that number today has dropped and has stayed fairly steady at around 48 to 50%. And so essentially what we've seen is sort of a proportional shift in favor of off-premise that has stayed fairly consistent since, the middle, essentially early 2022, if you will. And it's stayed fairly stable. And so what you would expect is, and we lived through this in late 2021, early 2022, and now it's sort of normalized, where there was a fairly rapid recovery in the full service restaurant space, specifically around experiential dining. And then today we're seeing a rapid recovery in the buffet space, which is, we thought, well, are buffets ever coming back?
Really?
Well, Golden Corral is certainly doing really well here in the U.S. right now, right? So,
it kind of makes sense though, because the diners are obviously, maybe they're not dining out as much every week.
Yeah,
they're going out there, they're looking for that value, and I think a lot of that you can create almost your value at a buffet, in my mind.
I think that's primarily one of the reasons. Also, in a sort of multicultural environment, buffets are attractive for folks who may have a hard time ordering in English or in your case, English or French. So in the US, like a lot of first generation immigrants, they may go to a buffet to save the interaction, stress that might
really
occur. Yeah. And we've seen that historically with buffets in particular. Right. So, and it's obviously not the vast majority of people going to a buffet, but it's sort of a safe space for someone who might fear that ordering process because of a language barrier.
Well, then you can also do the multiple trips, right? You're getting your price point, but you can do the multiple trips going up. And buffets today are such a variety.
Yeah.
In some of the buffets that we see today. So I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah. And they're showing some of the, diversity of the population, if you will. Right. So, the cuisine types are expanding beyond sort of, meatloaf and potatoes.
Exactly. There's like hundreds of items on there, right? On the menu.
Right.
So I can totally see how that tracks up.
But going back to Margot's original question, just purely about traffic in the US, we had we obviously lived through inflation. We still have menu inflation that we're worried about coming in the next couple of months when student loans kick back in, that sort of thing. So there's some traffic risk ahead, but we have underlying traffic problems because of the structure of our demographics. So, we're an aging population, maybe not as old as, some other nations around the world, but we have the number of consumers who are in what we call the sweet spot for restaurants, which is midlife. Specifically, if you're midlife with children, you tend to dine out more, you tend to spend more per person, in addition to just spending more because you have more mouths to feed. And there's fewer, the proportion of the population in that sweet spot is shrinking every year because we have more and more baby boomers retiring. And as soon as they retire, those utilitarian trips to restaurant, like the morning coffee and your lunch, which is a huge proportion of your weekly visits, those drop off significantly because you're saving your money for special occasions. You're going to take your grandkids out on the weekend. You're not going to, you're not getting your Timbits and coffee on a Monday morning on your way into work anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And so those visits drop off. And so we have a structural issue with traffic where, most of our growth is going to be coming from inflation and sales mix changes going forward. So, we're projecting a fairly flat traffic pattern for next year. I understand in Canada, there's a little bit of a different issue because in the US, we have a very slow growing population. And a lot of that has to do with, fewer kids just being born, but we also are losing out with our fights on immigration policy when it comes to having more people to feed. It's a tight environment for immigration. It's slower than historical norms, and in Canada, it's a lot different. And so that's going to potentially buffer some of the loss you get from a dwindling population, native population, if you will, who aren't having as many children. In the US right now, we're not benefiting from our immigration policy when it comes to our economy for that reason. And so traffic is going to be slower just naturally. Most of the people you see winning today are stealing it from other places. So, Chipotle tends to do really well while they're eating into other fast casuals in the QSR Mexican space, as well as, some casual dining people trading into casual.
Well, I want to ask you that because Starbucks, I believe, is eating into it. I think in my mind, because I'm seeing some statistics from Starbucks just really on the amount of food that's being ordered now per visit is enormously up in the Starbucks space. So I'm wondering if they're also using Starbucks as a means to replace like going out for a lunch or having a dinner is going to grab a sandwich or whatever while I'm grabbing my 4:00 coffee.
Yeah. Or what used to just be a trip for a coffee or a latte is now a trip for that and some egg bites or a bagel. And, and that would be a highly competitive situation for Tim Hortons, who, you're capturing the occasions where you don't necessarily feel like a donut, even though Tim Hortons has sandwiches, and other things, like your top of mind product for these brands, like you used to be Starbucks with coffee. Now that you're thinking, well, I'm going to get some baked goods or potentially a sandwich, they've transformed how people think of them. Some of that has to do with, creating that third space, if you will, where people can sit down and eat. But they've also done a really fabulous job in one of the things which we'll get to on the next slide in a minute, which is with their digital platform. And I know you have someone coming up to talk about that in the near future, which will be exciting to hear because they do a wonderful job of capitalizing on what is the biggest change in the restaurant market, in my opinion, and that has to do with digital order ahead. That's been the stickiest change in the market. We saw drive-through pop up and then come back down somewhat to pre-pandemic norms. But what's stayed elevated is, and we'll see it on the next slide, is the digital order ahead process. And it's not the huge chunk of the business, but if you look at that pre-COVID number there, that 3% for pickup, for example, and there's 5% before COVID was, order ahead for delivery. So these are digital orders for delivery. That jumped to 9% in 2020, but it's come back down to roughly what they were pre-pandemic. But what didn't change was order ahead for pickup. It used to be 3% of business. And before the pandemic, that might have been mostly Starbucks and a couple of other restaurants. And now 11% of orders are order ahead pickup. That is, a significant difference. And the brands that are doing a really good job on your morning commute of capturing those types of orders are really doing well right.
I got to ask you a question on this because I think this is fascinating. Do you feel that these companies that and these franchises and these locations that are using this mobile system for pre-ordering, do you find that they kind of figured it out? Because I believe before the COVID, it was sometimes cumbersome. They weren't as slick as they are today. I'm noticing the apps today and the pre-ordering process is so simple.
Yeah.
It's hard not to use it.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of it creates a different kind of loyalty for your customer because it goes from brand love to habitual orders, right? So, I can order, you can push your button and order your coffee every morning on your way into work, right? And so you can do the same at lunch if you don't want to sit in line, those sorts of things if you're working and want to get it back to your office quick. And a lot of it has to do with, we've done 10 years worth of innovation in 3.5, 4 years on the digital economy in the restaurant space, which used to be 10 years behind retail. And, it has used this opportunity to catch up, not maybe fully, but pretty close. Right. And so the brands that have done that have a pretty strong advantage because you can steer traffic. If you can build your audience on your app, you can steer traffic away from your customers really in a more powerful way than you could before, right?
Well, it's fun. It's interesting because I was saying this the other day. We were working on a show for natural disasters and what to do for natural disasters, and talking about a plan for natural having restaurants have a plan for natural disasters. And they said you need your tech stack nowadays for your restaurant. Like, what's your plan on your tech? We used to have your social media strategies, but I think this stuff is really starting to become almost your marketing channel as well. Is really connected to the audience through your app on your ordering system. It's almost becoming more, I would say, I don't want to say the word believable, but more impactful in the marketing is through your apps, through these ordering platforms.
Well, I think the restaurants, a big chain's ability to integrate their chief information officer and their team into marketing, culinary, and operations to service up each sort of pillar of the business is crucial. And but what you do see back of house and front of house is a really strong attempt. I'm in the U.S. I can speak to this is to centralize the data hubs, make sure that everything's speaking to each other, linking customer profiles to what they order so that you can control the marketing environment and do targeted, personalized, offers and things of that nature. And so that seat in the business is becoming more central because of the digitalization of the food service space.
Do you feel this will continue to grow in this way?
I think it'll probably hit its peak, and in the U.S., we've seen the deal environment for startups and technology really drop off a cliff this year, and so we'll have to see, what investments look like in new ventures. So, in our parent company's conferences, we used to see a ton of startups kind of popping in and out with small booths. I haven't heard of this tech company before. Some of them are huge the next year, and some of them have been swallowed up the year after, and that sort of pace of innovation in terms of what the number of companies that are servicing this market is starting to slow here in the U.S. because the market's starting to settle a little bit. But there's still a lot of work to do linking the front and back of house when it comes to analytics and data flows and the ability to have the kitchen understand that one of your customers is coming on site to pick up their order because you need to synchronize that. And that is the expectation that consumers have today, right? The synchronization of their timeline coming in to pick up their order and your delivery of that order to the pickup station is something that I don't think we've gotten perfect yet, right? There's, Starbucks still has a easily stealable, platform where you can go. There's just a bunch of coffee sitting there, and who is it really Rich getting it or not? Who knows? But and so we've even seen things like temperature controlled pickup lockers develop, and and those may have some viability, but it's a huge capital expense to bring to an existing store, right? So that's another potential opportunity there, is thinking about like, how do you improve that environment for the pickup situation? Because, you know, food can get cold, coffee can get cold, ice cream can melt, and someone can steal it, and you know, and so there's that portion of it we haven't quite got right yet.
Yeah, I think that's still in the works. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Rich, there's just to call out for those that can't see it, there's something here on your slide that's it's a Red Lobster to go pack with you know, which is obviously
that is a figment of a previous presentation, but yeah,
that's okay. But it spurred something I wanted to bring up and check in with you on. So if we think about where the business and where the dollars flowed between full service restaurants and, you know, quick service fast casual restaurants pre-pandemic, the dollars were sitting about 50-50, relatively the same size in the commercial restaurant space. Post-pandemic, we haven't seen that. So limited fast casual and quick service have been able to maintain, even through the recovery, a greater share of the dollars. And, you know, obviously there's a traffic piece to this that I'm getting here. And Rich, we're looking at your slide for pickup and delivery. And basically full service restaurants got into pickup, curbside pickup. The third-party apps made delivery much more viable for full service restaurants post-pandemic. So do you foresee in the US and Canada that we'll be back, there'll be a time where the dollars are shared between those two segments? Or, and especially I say this because you mentioned the consumer. So the younger consumers and the cost and some of those trips in the US, those utilitarian, you know, utility trips are going to wane. But do you see that the dollars may shift and we may see the balancing back there? And I'm going to ask a part B to this after you you chime in.
So I think to a certain extent we saw the dollars recover, but we continue to see year over year fast casual steal share from the entire business, both full service and limited, like QSR in particular. So it's, you know, people don't just trade down to fast casual, they trade into fast casual from QSR. And it's, you know, continually winning more and more share. And so that I think that I don't think it'll return exactly 50-50, to be honest, because of that. I think that the full service restaurant space in the US did a really good job in 2022 and in late 2021 of using their dine-in return to recover. But it hasn't, I think they were about 6 to 8 months behind full service, which has been problematic from a share standpoint, if you will. But it's returned, but it's gotten to the point where there's that stealing of traffic problem that they haven't fully figured out yet, because not all of them are all in on, you know, this sort of pickup process. We do know that a lot of them are doing it and having success with it, but you know, it's highly variable whether some restaurants prioritize it or not right now.
Rich, I have a question on that. Do we see higher ticket prices on takeout versus staying?
Yes, because oftentimes you'll see, you know, instead of an order being split 3 ways at a table, it'll be, you know, which appears as if it's 3 different transactions in the point of sale for the restaurant. The check average will, you know, be, you know, that all 3 on one check in the off-premise space, if you will. So the checks are larger, but some of that is just a reflection of how we choose to pay. Okay. And some of it also has to do with, you know, there especially at the height of the pandemic, and we have a stronger propensity to do this than before. There's more large parties off premise, if you will, you know, than there would have been there. You know, in the pandemic, people were having, you know, large pizza parties instead of going out for pizza, or ordering, you know, holiday meals instead of, you know, cooking themselves and stuff like that. So that's still an opportunity, and it's potentially one of the strong levers of growth that a full service restaurant should be pursuing. So
that's very interesting. And to pick up on that a little bit, what you said, you talked about, you know, the aging population in both US and Canada, when we think about that 55 plus, hopefully, market, they tend to be a little more financially stable, so less impacted by some of, the economic strains, the cost of inflation. They maybe paid down their mortgage, maybe they haven't. Do you see any shift in the US towards an older consumer, maybe a more financially stable, either keeping the dollars up and keeping the traffic up, whether it's having it delivered or dining out for experiences in the US? Or maybe just shifting and revitalizing that sector a bit?
We're doing a better job of keeping 55 plus consumers in the market than we did their parents, right? And so, but and so in that regard, they are spending more. If you want to compare the generation today versus the generation before at this stage in their life course, but they are reducing their spending just because, and that's because they're reducing the occasions. We often don't think about those utilitarian visits because we make them on the fly most often, when we're craving something and when we're out of the house. What you see now is, those consumers limiting their spending, but spending, per visit a significant amount because maybe they're bringing their family. They may be going on a shopping trip with their friends during the day and having a lunch. Those sorts of things. Those are really strong occasions still, and they've gotten stronger as each generation gets older, right? The sort of Saturday lunch with your friends when you're going shopping. That's something that happens with the retired community that is significantly strong, and it's an opportunity if you can keep them in the market longer. We need to keep them in the market longer for growth, but we'll have to figure out how to get them spending in a utilitarian way, because they are doing a really good job of doing those special occasions and those treats with family and the kind of running errands kind of trips, if you will.
Well, but we weren't really focused on that. We were focused on the millennials and the Gen Z, in a sense, on the menu. And I think it was, I don't know if it was your article that I read on that, that talked about, don't forget about the baby boomers, in a sense, because they're so significant importance into our industry that we tend to kind of forget about that. And I think it's important to make sure, because it wasn't in the plan that we were talking about many years ago. And I think it's so important.
I'm a proponent of, multi-generational marketing, if you will, just because the market structure sort of demands it, right? When baby boomers were, Gen Z or millennial age, when they were coming of age, it was extraordinarily exciting to market to the young or the largest population and demographic and in the economy. And you wanted to get them to spend. Well, now the structure of the market's a little different. We still need to make sure that we're catering to them, right? It's
a good call out though, Rich. I think it's so significant that we bring this up, because we almost put him to the side and said, no, it's going to be here. And I think that was one of the best articles that I've read in a while, was the fact that don't forget about this, because I think when you look at menus, and I think like Tim Hortons, Starbucks, some of these locations, I think there's some opportunity within their menu choices to really cater to that and brings back some nostalgia products, which I do believe there is some restaurants out there starting to work on some of those
doing
products.
a good job of that, right? The McDonald's with their, Grimace meals and other things, like they're doing
their commercial that they just launched recently, that's pulling back from the old movies and stuff of saying McDonald's. Wonder why that came out.
Quality, right? You're also seeing some QSRs. The reason why fast casual is doing so well in the US, it's a better quality experience, a better quality food. It's fresher, it's more customizable. We don't have nearly the fast casual segment in Canada the way the US does. And it was even slaughtered because of the successive shutdowns and lockdowns. But what you do see in Canada, just from my observation on the menus, you see some really nice higher quality offerings at quick service restaurants. And they probably are catering to that particular group. But it's really important to remember that, the baby boomer yesterday, or what we call those leading boomers, are different than the lagging boomers. And I'm going to think about this, another way to flip it around is, Gen Z and millennials were the highest spending cohort, not just because of the numbers, but because of the occasions. But we've just come through a pandemic. Kids as young as 8, 9, 10 have access to phones and apps, their parents' credit cards, DoorDash delivery, I know all sorts of people's 10, 12, 13, 15-year-olds order regularly. They've engaged in the market at a younger age, and they are used to ordering out. And, it'll be interesting to track this group. We call it Gen Alpha, but to see how they impact. And that's going to shake things up a little bit, the same way that I think your boomers and matures. Rich said, this isn't what it was a year ago. The generation of boomers have grown up going out of, restaurants through their mid part of their life, that wasn't my parents. They never went out to restaurants, except for special occasions.
Yeah. I mean, the baby boomers were the original sort of, fast food, they were the kids.
Adopters to it, right? Yep.
Yeah. And so they grew up with it. Some of them are learning how to engage with it digitally, and the younger ones don't need to learn so much because the digital divide is much smaller today than it was, 5-6 years ago between older adults and younger consumers. But there's definitely a lot of reasons why, we can keep them in the market and keep them engaged, because that it's something that they've grown up with and they're still excited about. You pointed out the nostalgia marketing. That's a quite distinct difference in strategy than throwing out a senior menu, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I think, very smart. It's not something that most baby boomers, I think, are going to be super excited about. Is like, well, I'd rather order off the kids menu if that's what you're going to do.
Now, this I like this Gen Alpha, by the way. I like the terminology. Is that we're going to have to also make a lot of decisions on those menus now, attracting that new generation that we probably haven't seen in the other generations of like health wise, selection, plant-based, all these factors that are coming in. Do you see that changing anything too, Rich? What's your indication on those?
Well, I think with the youngest generations, their taste palettes are going to be quite more diverse than
really. Okay.
And some of that is just purely demographically driven, but also when I was coming up, we were excited to have a McDonald's in our town, right?
Yeah.
And
been there.
Yeah. Now my son growing up, he's excited that there's 3 Korean fried chicken places that deliver to us, right? And so it's a different world, and the ability to kind of test and learn with new flavors is, I think, quite a bit more open with this generation than before. It's obviously highly variable from region to region and family to family. But if you're looking at, 60-70% of the market that live within suburban and urban environments, those kids are going to have much greater access to the most diverse, set of restaurants that we've ever really seen. And that's going to transform what the future looks like, because some of that's going to be their normal everyday experience.
So for operators out there, and I want to put a shout out on this because I think you nailed it so well, is you have to innovate. I think it's going to be very big on innovation for independent operators, is keeping that innovation train moving fast and keep looking at new items and new products. And I think that's going to be key. I think it is. I've always said when I was working with restaurants and doing menus and developing menus, I was always like, let's keep introducing the new products. It really helps, I find. And maybe, Rich, maybe I'm wrong, but hopefully I'm right. But it helped with a lot of the menu pricing, was introducing so many new products into the menu that there's always a new thing. I'm sure LTOs are hot still. Continuing to become, I think you see more in LTOs and casuals now, or not in casuals, but mom and pa's now than anything. But is that right? Is restaurants should be innovating? Am I saying the right thing?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about your customer base, and you think about them just aging through their life cycle. As they get older, they might visit a little bit less often. You have to have news to bring in someone else, right? You have to continually go find that new customer, and the LTO is the limited time offer is a natural way of creating a story for why someone should come try your restaurant for the first time, right? Or why someone should come back and they haven't been in a while. And so even if they don't order that limited time offer, the fact that you've put it out will give you a halo of innovation. It'll give them a reason to engage with you. And even if they come back and order the staple that they've always ordered, it's a news driver, right? And so that's sort of primary source number one. One thing we've been recommending right now because of price inflation is, menu innovations are really the safest time to introduce a new price point. So if it's a new menu item and you're innovating on the high end of your menu, it's the easiest way to introduce pricing, an increased price to the menu than, touching one of your staples, which may be right at the edge of what your customers are willing or able to spend. And so having that new news, something that's very exciting, people are willing to try it. They're a little less price sensitive to it. So that's certainly, I think, a strong strategy. It's not always appropriate for everyone, depends on what your abilities are to generate not only a really exciting product, but one that can be, operationally consistent is important too. So if you can deliver on the promise of the food that, showed in testing and all that stuff, then it's a really good strategy.
So Rich, I got to throw a strategy at you. Here, Margot, I'm going to throw this in at you. Okay, this is what I used to do. I'm sorry. Yeah. But we used to introduce things at do an LTO or introduce a product at a high price point and then bump up the other prices on the menu, but not because it made it look like they were still a deal, that we introduced a higher price point menu item on an LTO. So it helped us to leverage our other menu up, but still not be visible, because most people are looking at the LTO and going, wow, look at this. Yeah, but look at the menu. It's still a good deal. But done knowing that we had actually leveraged it back.
That's common. I've seen it. And
right? That's a tactic?
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's there's two ways or three ways a customer can respond to the price increase. They could not notice it and pay it, and they can afford it and everything's good. Maybe they can't afford it and they stop buying the thing the second time. They pick something cheaper, or they go somewhere else. And they could just get angry about the price increase, but still be able to afford it, right? Like so, and so so sometimes it's it's about fairness, and so part of the art of price management is giving sort of air cover to your pricing strategy, right? And so if you're going to be redesigning a menu or launching a new product that's sort of, hey, look over here, that's a pretty I think important tactic people use so that they're not disrupting their customer relationships.
Is that where that, getting a little off topic here, but is that where some of those bizarre items came on menus? There were like the huge item or the secret menu item and those kind of things that they came out. You'd be like, who's going to spend $50 on this? And then all of a sudden those ridiculous, it's sold, or you're like, wow, I can't believe people buy this. It helped elevate their regular menu prices up a little bit. It got the focus off of it.
So it doesn't always have to be a price increase. It could also be sort of a lure to get you to come to the middle, right? So if you're let's say you have 3 tiers of an entree. So like one of them could be a $50 tasting menu. The other one could be a 2 for $30 something or other, and then you have your regular entree price, right? And so if you're seeing not a lot of people upcycling to that second tier in your customer base, one way to potentially lure them is to get them thinking about the expensive thing, and potentially is like, well, the $30 makes more sense for me than the $50. And last time I spent 20, right? Like, and so a lot of times the growth that a restaurant experiences comes from those behavior changes that the customer makes. And so in some ways, I think the theory is that's a way to nudge them towards the middle. But of course, that restaurant could have adjusted the pricing below too at the same time. I think that just depends on where they are in their pricing cycle, because some of them have them on a calendar and some of them do it ad hoc. So
well, it's just to jump in a little bit on the innovation piece. I think, Rich, and you were I think I heard you say this first, to talk a little bit about barbell pricing strategy. So we can't just introduce high-end items and to cover the costs at that end. We're also seeing operators make sure that there's something at the other end. So you can still do an LTO. You've re-engineered something. Let's say it's a bowl. I don't know. You rework something else. You launch an LTO by putting in lower cost items. And so you've improved your margin, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a higher price point.
It goes the
but
other
you've
way.
improved the margin by re-engineering behind the scenes or to offer it. And I just know in Canada, we are seeing exponential growth in sort of value being marketed as value meals, value bundles, value things. I don't know. Is that still going on in the US, Rich?
I think you see a bit more of a balance. And I think some of that has to do with in our 2008 recession here in the US, there were some brands that got stuck in a value spiral. And so there's been an attempt to avoid that this time. And so the recommended approach is what, Margot alluded to is pretty common, which is this barbell pricing strategy or value proposition, if you will. It doesn't even have to be a pricing strategy, which is, your whole menu is held strong by two ends of the continuum, where you have premium products, and you can manage those in a number of ways, where you could be just increasing the quality of those products, taking your price up when you're doing that. You could be throwing out a very high-end premium limited time offer or new menu innovation. Then you have your sort of core menu items in the middle, and then at the bottom or on the other side, you have everyday value offers. You have limited time couponing and BOGOs and value propositions. McDonald's does a really good job on that side, where they're constantly cycling their everyday value menu. Went from $1 menu to a 2 for $5 for 3 for $6. They're always sort of adjusting it to, kind of like when a retail food operator changes the where they have all their food in the store. They take they rearrange everything just to get you to walk down the new aisle. I think McDonald's does a good job of kind of refreshing that to get people exploring their menu more.
Very interesting, though. I love the terminology around that. In 2008, was that the year of the burger wars?
There was it was
it was the year of the burger wars. Remember that?
Yeah.
Who could have the cheapest burger?
Yeah.
In the States? I remember reading that.
Yeah, we had the housing crisis and the winner in that period was really Little Caesars, though.
Really?
Yeah, from
they got the lowest they could get, hey?
Yeah, well, you could feed a family for $5, large
I remember
pizza.
That. And then they came up to Canada around that time. There was that surge into the Canadian market.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. I find that so fascinating. I love the barbell thought.
When we looked at who did well during that time in the US, it was one hand, the Little Caesars and the Checkers of the world, if you're familiar with Checkers.
Yep.
So Checkers and Rallies is, low, the very value-oriented burger, but it's a high-quality burger at the same time. But they do cater to lower-income neighborhoods, and they did very well because you could feed your family for $10, right? And Little Caesars had the $5 hot and ready, which is still only $5.55, maybe it's $6 now, but it's not that much less. They're not that much more expensive today. And they did well because of the same reason. Like they had those folks, those brands did well. And then the folks that had the balanced approach did well too, in the middle. And then the fine dining just seems to be impervious to problems unless you shut the economy down like we did.
Well, I think there's something to learn from that time period into today's market that we can pull, because it's almost talking very similar to why we're seeing the surge in the buffet space.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing, right? You can feed. It's that whole value of how much do I spend and how much do I get from that spend, right? Where's that value of what I'm spending for the least amount of money? And I don't think that's ever going to change.
Yeah, no, it's, there's only a handful of reasons why we eat. Most of them are about hunger, and then can we afford it? And do we think it's worth it? Right. And so whether we can afford it and whether we think it's worth it depends on the occasion. So that those sorts of things don't really change. And, the strategies that they can evolve over time, and how you execute them. But that sort of premise of a balanced barbell, especially if you're not a value-oriented brand or a high-end brand, is extraordinarily important.
Yeah. Well, Margot, Rich, this has been an incredible kickoff to season 4. Unbelievable content here. Is there anything else you want to touch on? And wouldn't mind you guys I was going to do the CTA, but just a recap. Do you want to just share a couple of highlights that you want to just make sure operators, if they're going to remember anything, this is what you need to remember. So Margot, why don't you start and then we'll get Rich.
Sure. I think that Rich sort of opened up with this, which is that we've seen such a great surge in Canada because optimism is high. There's a lot of negative media. And we know that there's, still a potential it's either a soft landing or it's a recession coming. But consumers have been spending and we're back to work. And so there's some great optimism in the market around that space. Would just suggest that there probably is some caution going forward, that operators need to stay on top of what's about to happen, because the share fight for traffic is not just between the restaurants, it's between the grocery stores and food service away from home. And, net, we've seen it's very visible in the Canadian market how the grocery stores have fared. Yep. And I think that we have a good news story going on here and lots to be excited about with some prudent planning over the next few months. But feeling pretty excited about what I think lies ahead.
You know what? That is, what I'm going to do, 2 things I'm going to do. One, I got to run to a quick commercial here, an ad read, Rich, and then we're going to get you to say yours on what you have, so we can have like the big finale. But I think, Margot, that is the best information I have heard in a long time. So kudos to saying that, because we need that right now. I think the industry needs that, because we need the North Star right now on where we're headed within our industry. And that's good news that you just said. So let's cut to this. This is another ad read. Don't laugh. This is Maple Leaf. Be right back. Here we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to, this is our first ad read. I don't know if you do welcome to, or I don't know how you handle these, but we're going to try anyways. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're a foodie, you love chicken, this is the product you really want to dive into. You know what? It's Sysco's classic chicken breast strips made by Maple Leaf. They are rocking it with this product, right? So fully cooked chicken breast. I think it's not that mushy stuff that we see and sometimes you get with a product like this. There's grill marks, so it's got that grill appearance that you want when you have those open face sandwiches. They've been pulling it off the barbecue in the backyard. Now, these ain't your normal strip. You just ain't. Okay? They're perfectly cut, pre-cut for your convenience. You don't need to chop them up. You grab them, no knives in the kitchen kind of thing, right? You can apply it right to the menu right away. You don't need to pre-cooked. I don't know. I wouldn't be cooking chicken breast in my kitchen anymore. Not with the challenges with labor, all those different things that are happening. Who wants that headache? Use these products. It's really great. They're great for sandwiches, wraps, soups, pastas. And you could probably make a really quick pasta using these, right? Imagination go wild with these products, right? So no more worrying about who cooked the chicken breast. Are they pre-cooked enough? Are they cooked enough? Are they cooked through? You don't have to worry about none of that, okay? Now, also, what's really crazy about these products are that they taste really good. They're impressive. They look good, right? They're worthy of putting on any menu that's out there. Now, wait, just 1 second. It's not it. These strips really are your best friend. I think you can make friends with this chicken breast. These pre-cut products, I think they're incredible, right? All you do is you just thaw them. You can use them right away. Eat and serve. Boom, done. They're like having a sous chef on your fingertips, at your fingertips, on your fingertips, at your fingertips. No more work. You've eliminated all those headaches. And I tell you, I would use these as for all those. I get rid of all those headaches. You don't want those headaches, right? Now, also, so you know what? There's specific specs. So you can't go out to the store and grab these. These are made specifically for Sysco. So there's going to be restaurant specs that are going to be involved here. So you want that. You don't want people going out and say, I can make this at home and going again and make it at home. You want those products you can get right here, right now, that are different than you have at home, right? A lot of value added. You want to add into that. that also helps you with your menu price. There's different sizes you can see on there and your pieces you can get. You know what? Simple. This product will move mountains, move sandwiches, move pastas, move all those products out there without the headaches you get from a non-pre-cooked product that's not like this, right? So check it out. Anyways, that's Sysco. I don't know if that was painful enough for you, but Rich, wow. Whew. I'm gonna have to cut those down a little bit. Anyways, Rich, tell us your takeaways from today. If people need to really lean, if we have kept anyone after today, but after that. So, what's your takeaways?
I mean, I definitely, I want to, double Margot's message about excitement. It's been a really long road, and it's hard to sometimes. Well, it's actually easy to forget that there's light at the end of the tunnel. One, I would say, look back and be proud of the work that you've gotten, or that's gotten you to this point, with your business, because you deserve a pause and to celebrate that. And confidence will return. It has in the U.S. But we're always in a wait and see mode when it comes about recession, but we are starting to hear more chatter about soft landing here, which is really nice to see. So with that, I would, if you're following a similar pattern than us, I would hope that you would experience a similar recovery in the next year or 6 months than that we have, because it's just got better, right? It got the operating environments slowed down and things of that nature. But what we were left with is a little bit of a different market, right? More digital, slightly more off-premise. Off-premise is a very strong way of going and stealing traffic, that sort of thing. Making sure that you are tailoring the entire customer journey across every ordering channel that you have, so that it's seamless and synchronized to their expectations and so on. Those types of things are crucial today. Menu innovation has been ramped up here quite a bit here in the U.S., and it's being used to not only provide air cover for price increases, but also to drive news and traffic into the restaurants. So in some ways, it looks like before the pandemic. In other ways, we got a lot more technology to deal with. So it's a lot of excitement.
Wicked. I love that. So if people want to know more, you guys have your emails there. Can they email you?
Yep.
Wow. We'd love to hear from anybody.
Okay. I love that. And then the website, if people want to go over to the website, it's technomic.com. Do you even say www anymore? I don't think you do. We'll age yourself if we say that. But you can go over there, find amazing stuff and information. You guys are the best when it comes to this information in the industry. And I can't thank you enough for being on the show today, being our first show.
Well, happy to be here. Well, thanks for having us. It was an honor.
Awesome. Margot, thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
I think okay, we'll see you guys later. Awesome. For everyone else, I'm just going to do a wrap up here, and these are all new to us. So this really brings us to the end of this flavorful episode of the Daily Restaurant Show, our first season, season 4. We really hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of, what's happening with this recovery with Rich and Margot and what they talked about. So if you're hungry for more of these expert advice and information and stay ahead of this curve, please make sure you go over to Technomic and check out their website. Like I said, they're the best in the industry when it comes to the information that you need to know of really where to go and what to navigate within your business. So you can go over to technomics.com to really discover and really look at what you can do to help with your success of your business. So on that, as always, I really appreciate you joining us today and really being able to listen to our first show for season 4. Remember to subscribe, follow for free, and leave a review, leave a comment, spread the word if you can about the Daily Restaurant Show. But you know what? Lastly, I'm just going to share this. So next week, this is we're always pre-recorded a week ahead. So next week, we're also going to be bringing back the news show on Monday. So this is really the hottest topics that's happening in the industry, with 4 of us in a round table talking about what's going on. Also, David Hopkins will be joining us from 15 Group. Chef Leanna and Melanie from TD Bank with Women in Food Service is also going to be back as well. So we have an amazing year lined up for you. We are the only daily restaurant show, podcast and streaming show on the planet. And I'm proud of that. And I'm proud to be able to offer you amazing insights and content into our industry as much as we can. So all the best, everyone else. Have a great rest of your day. And here we go. Have a great one. Thank you.